Welcome to the Automation Unplugged podcast, the podcast for technology professionals, featuring leading industry personalities. I'm your host, Ron Callis.
Let's get started.
Hello there, Ron Callis with another episode of Automation Unplugged. Today's show, as is true with all of our shows, is brought to you by One Firefly, my day job over at One Firefly. And that affords me the opportunity to step aside and do these interviews and do all the prep work and, of course, the post-production with my awesome team. So we have another fantastic guest. This particular individual I've known for many years, actually in his current role and some of the things that he was doing before. We'll dive into some of that. And many of you, particularly if you attend CEDIA or you attend buying group events, you know him as well. And that is Matt Bernath. He is the president of Vital. And I'm super excited that he's here. We're going to have a fun conversation. We're going to talk about business and growth and opportunities and trials and tribulations of running a small business and everything in between. So let's go ahead and jump in. Let's say hi to Matt and let's get the conversation started. Matt, how are you?
Doing well, Ron. How are you doing?
Man, it's another day in paradise. I'm happy to be here with you. I'm also going to admit that you and I, you're on my show, Automation Unplugged. You recently had me on your show. It's going to come out in a few months or come out on your schedule there. And I'm just honored that we both freed up our calendar to make this happen.
Yeah. It's amazing how much effort that took.
Well, you're a busy guy. I'm usually sitting over here free. My calendar is usually wide open, but you run a very planned out schedule many months in advance. So I'm glad we made that happen.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And I think, that speaks to probably one of the topics we're going to cover today, which is where you are in your business journey, right? That's been intentional. And, you're picking fruit off the tree where some of us are still watering and tending to our seedlings.
Well, Matt, where are you coming to us from? Where are you physically located right now?
I'm currently in Tustin, California. So many people might know Irvine or Anaheim, which is Disneyland. So basically about 20 minutes away from Disneyland and about 20 minutes away from the beach.
Okay. Many of us around North America and around the world heard of all the fires that took place in Southern California. Were you near some of that?
It depends on which fire. So we are essentially surrounded by lots of stuff that can burn. The most recent fires in LA, thankfully, didn't affect me, but it did affect a lot of the people that I know pretty well. And, of course, integrators out there who service those areas were affected. But the most recent fire that affected us was 2017. So it's been a while. But yeah, we've had several of them come through, and I think it's just part of living in California.
It is beautiful. It's beautiful weather. It's a little expensive, but it is pretty stunning. I love visiting California. But yeah, between the earthquakes and the fires, it can be dangerous. It certainly is not without its challenges.
Yeah, well, and then you guys have in Florida hurricanes. I mean, I think no matter where you choose to live, there's going to be something. Even in the parts of the country that don't have natural disasters, I think they get giant bugs and humidity instead. So, I mean, I think you kind of pick your poison. And no matter what, we all take whatever we have for granted anyway. Because as I travel the country, when I speak at different events or whatever, I find something that I fall in love with at about every location, and people are like, oh. Yeah, I kind of forgot about that.
Yes.
When you speak to our weather, and this is just what we live in. So no matter what, we take it for granted, but it's good to have visitors to remind us how good we have it.
Amen. It is. It just is. It is what it is, right?
Yeah.
In terms of Vital, for those that don't know, if they've been living under a rock, no offense to anybody, but if you've been living under a rock, you don't know Vital. Matt, give the down low on Vital. What is the business and who do you serve and how do you help folks?
Yeah. So Vital is a group of tenured business experts, and we help currently custom integrators and other luxury home service businesses to build businesses that they love that help them create freedom of time and money. And so we do that through a lot of efforts in coaching and benchmarking, working directly with people to improve their businesses.
Now, I think of I've been around long enough to where I remember the origin of Vital, and in the beginning, way back when dinosaurs roamed the land, Vital was exclusively doing financial management or consulting and counsel for integrators. And that's when Steve and Paul were still in the picture. And we here at One Firefly even engaged Vital actually to help with some of our giving us some coaching on our finances and financials in the business. And today I know there's a lot more to Vital, right? So this is not a sales pitch for you or me, but just your business is far more comprehensive today. And so how do you think about, how do you and your team, because I know you have a large team, how do you guys ultimately look at assisting integrators that they have an ambition for growth or prosperity or for scaling, or they have some pain in their life or their business and they're hoping someone can give them counsel? I'm personally a big fan of coaches and consultants. I've engaged with many of them through my whole business career. I still engage. We're probably here at One Firefly in a different engagement with 3 or 4 different coaches or consultants in different forms or fashions right now. But how do you ultimately determine the best way to help the business or the business leader that you guys might engage?
Yeah, a couple of questions in there that I'll answer. The financials of any business is a scorecard of what's happening in the company. And so when you think about from a financial perspective, we will always consider financials to be incredibly important. What we recognized is when we focus so heavily on financials and having super clean data, that's really, really important. It's important to a certain subset of our customer base or our potential customer base who are ready for that.
Sure.
What we've recognized over the last 4 years of working with really over 400 integrators is that depending on where they are in the growth curve, we have to have a right-sized solution for them. And the one solution that had been built for so many years is fantastic for 20% maybe of the integrators out there. We had this huge gap of service where we wanted to help other folks, but they weren't there quite yet in their journey. Eventually, they will get to that point where they want to have perfect data, perfect financials. They weren't there yet, right? We needed to solve some other constraints before we got there. But no matter what, we're still, and we will always be advocates for using data to drive decisions in the organization. And so ultimately what we have done is we've evolved to the point where we recognize different data points throughout the organization to tell us what are the constraints that we need to attack first. And we really look at it from 3 different perspectives. We have, sales, people or team, and operations. And there's a bunch of other stuff that goes inside of that we can talk about later. But what we'll do is we will diagnose, much like, when you go to the doctor asks a bunch of questions. We have systems and tools that help us to diagnose what we call the biggest constraint or the greatest constraint. And then we determine what the right next thing is for that organization. Sometimes it's going to be sales, sometimes it's going to be team, and there's a bunch of different components around that.
I got it. And then what's, if I could lift the hood a little bit. So you run someone through, you or your team run people through that assessment. Is it presented into a set of advice or recommendations into the categories of the business that your team believes are the constraint, or where the largest constraints lie that are maybe holding a business back? Or is it led by your team, or is it the customer saying, I have the most pain over here, help me here?
Yeah, so great question. Oftentimes the pain is the symptom. It's not actually the cause or the problem. Same as in our body, right? So what we do is we have a process of peeling back the layers we actually help them and we teach them how to do that. We have some tools. We have the CI Focus Finder tool, for example, that actually allows us to drill down through a process to say, okay, if these things are true, then this is probably your biggest constraint, and let's go attack that. Then we have systems that we've built that help us to attack those constraints. So it's really all process oriented, and it's done in the fashion of our team working with the client, but also in a peer group setting, right? So we've built this incredible community where it's not just one-on-one, me and Ron talking about Ron's business. It's our entire team and all of their peers helping them to identify what's the biggest constraint and how do we solve for that constraint. And we're not picking solutions out of the cloud. All of these solutions exist. These are all solutions that we've built and implemented over the years.
All right. Allison on my team here at One Firefly, she did some research and dug up a graphic. I'm going to put this graphic onto the screen. And for my listeners that are on their morning walk or their morning drive to the job site, you're going to have to just use your imagination, because I'm going to ask Matt to use illustrative words to help us understand what's on the screen. But this is a graphic. I actually saw you speak this spring, and I saw a version of this graphic in one of your talks. And so if you could maybe speak to it and how this fits into the way that you and your team think about working with integrators, I'm going to give it a shot here. So maybe describe what we're seeing and then describe what this means.
Yeah. So this is our success model. This has been built on really the last, let's call it 15 years of Vital working with integrators, but heavily evolved over the last 3 or 4 years in identifying how do we reach our target of affecting 1 million people. And what we identified there is that, most integrators have this version of their perfect business, whether that's a business that runs without them, whether that's a business they could hand off to their kids. Maybe it's a business that just provides them an adequate living where they can invest in other things. I mean, they don't necessarily have the perfect business envisioned in that moment, but as we start to unpack it through questions, they get clear about what their perfect business is. And that's the goal. And if you think about our experience with integrators, it revolves around them calling us for help, right? Or, in one way or another coming to us and saying, hey, we want something to be different than it is today. So through those conversations we've identified, and again, we've met with over 400 integrators, asking them a ton of questions. We figured out that what prevents them from getting to that perfect business are 3 things that are identified in red on this model. The first one is inconsistent sales. So what this looks like is, I don't know where my next lead is coming from. I'm relying on referral only, which is great when it's great. It's not when it's not. Some of my project partners come and go. If, God forbid, I lost a project partner, I'd be really in dire straits. It's this inconsistent sales piece that is, one of the main drivers. And then there's people problems. So that shows up as, I can't find or retain, or gosh, I'm the only one who's thinking like an owner. Why are none of my employees bringing it every day? Or, man, I'm growing so fast, I don't know who to hire next. Things of that nature. Those show up as people problems. And then lastly, the third thing that keeps most business owners from getting to that perfect business is just inefficient operations. So this shows up as, not being totally profitable, not even knowing where the money's going, how much of it is mine. Of course, the bottleneck, whether that's the owner or other people in the business, and just not having repeatable processes that manage themselves.
That one, Matt, was my breakthrough. I founded my business in 2007, and in 2013, that was my epiphany. I remember it was like April of 2013. I had a light bulb moment. I was actually in a peer group similar to maybe your facilitated group discussions, but I was in a facilitated group discussion and I realized it. And I actually then went on a journey to, in my case, bring in operations and finance expert. And that person gave me such clarity on my business that again, I could preach for hours about the benefit of what that did for me personally and for the business. So it's got to be a big one, I would imagine, for many businesses out there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, honestly, these 3 things affect nearly every business, not just integrators, right? Well, what we really want and need in order to get to that perfect business, what we need is sales certainty. We need to know what's coming, how to make sure that on a regular basis we have leads coming in, those leads are closing, where they're closing in a healthy way. We, of course, need to build a trusted team. So many of the integrators, when they talk about their perfect business, it's one that doesn't require them to show up every day, or if they do show up, they get to do just the stuff that they love. And of course, you need a trusted team to do that. And then lastly, the profitable production piece, we need to make sure that we're not just producing, but we're producing in the most profitable way, which takes a bunch of different components. So the way that we solve for these things, the way that we provide those three key elements, the sales certainty, the trusted team, and the profitable production, is through installing 9 systems in the business. And those 9 systems are things that Vital does really well, but also that we have recognized our peers, the other integrators in the community are bringing some solutions to the table as well. We know for a fact that when we install all of these systems, and by the way, this takes a while, as you just described, your epiphany was 11 years ago, right?
Yeah.
In our experience, it takes about 3 to 5 years to fully transform one of these businesses. And that's when everybody's bought in and doing the work. Most integration companies and most small businesses just never get to that point, right? There's a stat from the Small Business Association that 80% of small businesses just end up closing the doors. They don't actually get to selling. They just go away, right? So we're recognizing that 20% of the businesses out there roughly are able to achieve some level of exit or perfect business. But anyway, there's a bunch of different things that we do in helping our members to install these systems.
No, I love that. I would challenge that so many business owners. I can say this because I remember at different stages of my entrepreneurial journey, I at least pondered this, which is, maybe it's just good enough.
Yeah.
Yes, I have stress and this is not great, but it's going to be so hard to go figure that out. And as an entrepreneur, it's very lonely. You can feel like that hard obstacle in front of you almost feels impossible. And my counsel, would be that you don't have to be alone. There are other entrepreneurs you can fellowship with. There are coaches and counselors that can help you, point you in the right direction. And when you find the right ones, they are worth their weight in gold because they can save you so much anguish, so much stress. I mean, and imagine for your customer base, Matt, you and your team, that's what you guys are for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you bring up community, right? The community piece is so important, having that community of people who are going through it with you. And of course, everybody is at a different stage. But it reminds me of a conversation you and I had recently. I think maybe even been on a podcast where you talked about how lonely it is as an entrepreneur. And, the component of being able to have people to talk to is so important. But beyond that, what you discovered in some of the peer group work that you've been doing is you've discovered what's possible. Because I remember what you told me, and that sticks in my mind because it's absolute truth. It's even what we share with our members. Once you know something's possible, then you go for it, right? And if you look at the technology side of our industry, it happens every moment of every day. You go to the CEDIA Expo and you watch the integrators walk around and they learn about what's possible. And then what do? They go back into their business and they start designing systems around what they just learned. The same can be true in the business side of the business, and it should be true, is once we learn what's possible, once we sit next to an integrator who's making the kind of profit or living the kind of lifestyle we want to live, we're like, wait a minute, this can be done. I want that, right?
Yeah.
And so as you just brought up, you said sometimes you're overcome with this good enough mentality. I think it affects all of us until you see someone else doing what you want. And you're like, wait a minute, I want to be like that guy. And so that's the beauty of the community that we've built. We love it so much.
Yeah. Again, you and I talk frequently. So it was at some point in the recent past, you and I were just commenting on the power of being authentic And when you are being honest with yourself, and then you're allowing that to play out in your work life, and you're being authentic in what you're doing in your business, and you're representing yourself honestly to others, and your business is being presented to your community in the way that is really in your mind's eye, how you want your business to be presented, it is less stressful. And what I found to be true is that my business has been able to reach much higher levels of performance because I wasn't shielded. Now this gets a bit meta and we don't have to necessarily go there, but sometimes business leaders can allow other members of their team, business leaders on their team, let their mandate or their beliefs or their willingness to accept certain levels of performance to be good enough. And I can even admit in a period of my business, I did that for a sprint, and it led to probably the period where I was the least happy professionally of my whole career. And, my breakout was when I ended up reacquiring full control of my business. This happened back in 21. And from there, it was, I was going to be authentic to myself in the marketplace, or I'd go do something else because I I love myself too much to not do that.
Yeah.
It was causing too much unhappiness. And I said, I deserve to be happy and I want to be authentic.
Yep.
And the result is the business has continued to thrive. So, but it just with Vital, I mean, how do you get business owners to find themselves again? Because so many of them probably get buried under the anxiety and the stress of the day to day of running their business.
Yeah. Great question. And this, we're going to stay meta, I think, for a little while, because that's where I've been living since really 2018, when I sold my integration company. There was a stat that I read recently. It says 87% of humans right now are running in a constant state of fight or flight. Not wild. And when you're in
high
a constant
cortisol levels.
Yeah. When you're in a constant state of fight or flight, which is just that anxiety feeling, when that happens long enough, it becomes an ingrained comfort that you seek, which is wild. And so when you think about that, if you look at business owners as a fraction of that 87%, even if it was just 87% of people, but I think in the business, in the business world, entrepreneurs is higher. I don't know about you, Ron. I think you've probably reached a level of Zen that many of us hope for, but every day I have to be very intentional about reducing my stress and cortisol and fight or flight, and just being aware of when that's happening and affecting me. And when you look at the integration world as a whole, we're in service to so many people, right? And I think by and large, and there's many exceptions or some exceptions to this, by and large, integrators are people pleasing people. When you look at the swath of who we work with, most of them wake up every day. They want to make other people happy, right? They want to see the technology working. That's why they end up giving away so much free service. They end up doing all these extra things they don't need to be doing. Like, they just want to make people happy at the end of the day. And to get a little meta, where that usually comes from is a lack of self-worth, right? And I've learned that for myself, and I've learned that through working with some of our integrators, is really asking them, like, hey, do you value what you do at the deepest level? And when we start peeling back the layers, many of them don't. They're just happy to be able to play with toys all day long and happy to have people pay them to do that. And it's almost like they're begging for the business. They're begging for the opportunity to do that for more people. And when we show up in that way, we're showing up in a version of ourselves where there's so much lack, versus saying, hey, you know what? I have this incredible skill set. I mean, integrators, this. They're like some of the smartest people on every job site, period, hands down. There's so much skill in our industry that we give away for free because it's just a lack of, I guess, self-worth, right? So it goes back to your self-worth comment.
Well, and a demonstration of that, or maybe a financial example of that, you'll know far more about this than I will, but I've observed it, is that there are many integrators, and I'm just going to pick a random revenue number because it'll be some easy math for me.
Yeah.
But if someone's doing $5 million in revenue I would imagine a lot, call this a educated assumption, but I would venture a lot of integrators are out there running around at a 10% net profitable business or less, but let's call it 10%. 10%, $500,000 take home, maybe after you pay yourself a salary. That's a nice lifestyle. You can run a very inefficient business, a very mediocre business, but be making very comfortable money and be maybe completely satisfied with that.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're wired, like me, and I know some of these folks out there, they learn. You mean there's people running 20% net profitable businesses? You mean there's people running 25% net profitable businesses? I don't know how high do they go, Matt? Like how the
25% is 25% is pretty rare air. Our average again, this is 400 integrators worth of financial data, so it's pretty real. It's about 7.5% is the average for the industry, which means, of course, there's some performing above, some are below. 15% is good, 20% is great, 25% is incredibly rare, but it's doable. Like we have members that are at 25%. We have members that are 15, 20. We even have members that haven't hit that 15% range for any number of reasons. We also know there's chasms that you have to cross, and this, of course, in your business, you've crossed these chasms where the profitability is reduced because you're giving way to growth.
There's plateaus or step function levels in your business. What are those big? Is it 3 million, 5 million, 8 million? Like where are the levels? And just for clarity, in my poor man's version or explanation, there's just levels of revenue and operational structure that there's plateaus in how much a business throughput can get done before you start to need to add layers of management or oversight. Yeah. And so if you imagine just crossing over that milestone, you might have to layer in more operational costs. They're not generating revenue, so they're going to immediately eat into profitability until you can grow into the upper bounds of where now that new structure is maximally profitable.
Yeah. Yeah. If you get to that point. Yeah. I love talking about this because it eases some of the stress for some integrators. It also helps them recognize why they're at a certain place. So under $1 million is really challenging, right? This is 5 people, 5 to 7 people or less. It feels like a ton of work because it is. And of course, those integrators that are under $1 million are hearing about all the things they should be doing from the guys that are much larger, and they want to do it all. And so they have in the back of their heads, they have all this shame as to why they don't have their financials the way they should. Why are they not doing all the marketing that they should? These guys are wearing a lot of hats. It is an incredibly difficult business to run. Can be pretty profitable, because at that point there's not a lot of infrastructure. But if you're running a business that's under $1 million, and let's say you're older than 35 or 40, it can feel especially like a lot of work, right? Because at that point, you're just not wanting to work as hard as you did before. Yeah. The $1 million to $2 million chasm is what we see. Like really, the run up to 2 million, you want to get there as fast as you can, because now you have the point. At the $2 million point, you're at 10 or 12 people. You have enough infrastructure to be able to actually delegate some things off of the owner's plate. The owner can start thinking of themselves as an owner, not the guy that wears 75 hats. So that's where a $2 million business can be a pretty fun place for people to land and stay. And that's oftentimes where an integrator will stop growing if they're not personally growing as a leader. Because if you think about 10 people, that means there's 9 direct reports. That's a lot for an integrator. And usually at that size, you're not making enough money to have like a real leadership structure. So pretty much everybody's reporting to the owner. There might be a little bit of sub reporting in there. Right. So that $2 million range is, one of those, so let's call them a plateau before you cross the next chasm. The next chasm to cross is between 2 and 4. So as you're getting up to the $4 million range, and that plateau between 4 and 5 million is probably the best place to be as an integrator, because now you have a business, let's say you have 20 employees, 20, 25 employees. You do have some leadership structure. The only integrators that we see making it to that point in a very healthy way are the owners who have either some leadership experience from the past, or they themselves have grown as a leader along the way. $4 to $5 million integration company. Those are it's a great spot. 15, 20%, you can be taken home.
Owner can step away, take a vacation, business still runs, revenue still comes in and is earned.
Yep. And there's actually an argument, and not many people have successfully done this, but at that size range, if you're running a $4 to $5 million business at 20% net, you can give up 5% or so, right? Maybe more, and actually have someone run the business for you. And you don't even need to come in. If you've built the business the right way. Now that's not easy, but it's very possible to do that. And you can still, think about it, Ron, if you paid yourself a salary and you took home 10%, so you're making that $500,000 and you don't have to come into work every day. That's a pretty good gig for people, right? You've got somebody
good gig. A lot of people would sign up for that. A lot of people listening would sign up for that.
A lot of people would sign up for that. Again, not easy to do. It's going to take years, but it's worth it, right? If you're sitting in that spot where you're, let's say, 40 to 55, and you want that, it's totally possible. And even older, if you've got some gas left in the tank. I don't want to sound ageist, of course, but I'm just using real data from people we've met with.
Yeah.
And then the $4 to $8 million chasm, or let's call it $5 to $8 million chasm, that is the danger zone. There are a lot of integrators who have slipped into that, who've really struggled to make it, because an $8 million integration company is a pretty big business around here, right?
Mm-hmm.
In our industry, that's a fairly large business. It takes a different level of leadership skill. It certainly takes, in order to be a very healthy $8 million plus business, it takes a different level of financial prowess. You really do need to have a CFO, level person on staff. So you talked about the investments into management talent. That really has to happen from the $5 to $8 million range, as you cross that chasm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, an $8 to $10 million integration company can be a very fun, profitable integration company to run. As you grow beyond that, the next chasm is 10 to 14, and then of course, 14 and above, there's that's fairly rare air. But those are kind of the chasms. And again, the $4 to $5 million range, I think, is really the sweet spot. But you can be profitable at really any of the plateaus. But crossing the chasm, you're going to give up a little bit of profit.
Yeah. What makes up our industry? What are most of the sizes of the businesses in the residential technology? I know that resi-mercial, that term might offend some, but that type of integrator, keeping the Avixa, the commercial integrators over there, the resi, what is the typical size of these businesses?
That's a really hard number to put our finger on, because there's so many small integrators that none of us even touch or talk to. They're buying from the distributor. They're 1 to 5 man operations. That
the 1,000 integrators that are members of buying groups,
right,
and go to CEDIA. Those are the numbers we all know pretty well. But then you hear, what Snap talk about. They do business with 20,000 businesses.
Right.
And you and I are going, where are they? How do we meet them? Because there's like these 1,000 companies that we all know and work with every day.
Yeah. So, when you think about the 1,000, which I think we have pretty good data on, it's about 2.5 million to 3 million is the average in there, right? So many of them are, let's say, crossing that chasm. And that's, again, where we see that 7.5% net operating profit because that's who we're kind of exposed to. And we are working with some smaller dealers, but for the most part, in the history of Vital, or at least the last 15 years, most of our integration clients have been 2 to 4 million. We've now opened that up to, a much larger subset of smaller dealers as well as larger ones.
Matt, are there any particular metrics in a business that business owners should be obsessing over? We practice EOS at One Firefly. So that means there's a dashboard and our leadership L10 every week. There's a stand up with our leadership team, and we review every metric on that dashboard every single week. Everybody knows what's green and what's red. What are metrics that business owners listening or tuning in should be obsessing over?
Yeah. So I love this topic because what you just brought up, I think an organization hears that and says, man, I really want that, right? Especially integrators. They want all the numbers. They want all the data. They're very detailed folks. The metrics have to be right-sized to the organization. I mean, I'm guessing here, but there was probably a point in your entrepreneurial journey where you wanted that, but there was no effing way you were going to get it.
Oh, dude,
Right.
I started this in '07. I didn't have that until 19.
Right. Yeah. 12 years in.
This is
Right.
12 years in, and
12 years
I
in.
had no dashboard, and I was flying the plane at night, and I did not know what the
Right.
instrument panel was reading.
And if you tried to get the dashboard 5 years earlier, you would have added so much administrative overhead. You wouldn't have been able to focus on the things you needed to focus on, which were clearly sales and getting over your own chasms.
Yeah.
So when people ask me about the metrics, I have to be real careful because we have our set, I have 28 metrics that the Vital system has been working through for, 15 years. Those aren't right-sized for every business. And that's actually something that we've learned over the last 4 years is, man, if we're going to really impact 1 million people, we need to open up our minds to right-sizing metrics based on where they are in their journey. Because yes, we'd love to have all these 28 metrics, but if we tried to implement that in $1 million business, it just doesn't work, right? So no matter what, though, some version of these three things are important.
Okay.
Gross margin. Profit, bottom line profit always starts with gross margin. So that's metric one. That's the most important, I think. Pretty damn close to that is cash flow. And again, these are versus giving you actual metrics. I'm going to give you categories of metrics.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
gross margin can be broken down in a lot of different ways, but some version of that's right-sized for the organization. Cash flow metrics that are
I know
right-sized.
so many businesses that have been killed by cash flow. They signed all these wonderful projects, but the money's
Right.
not coming in, and that you can't make payroll without cash or money in the bank.
Yeah. Well, and that's the funny thing is money in the bank looks sometimes better than, many integrators, many business owners, forget just integrators. They look at their bank account and say, man, there's a lot of money in there. I'm good. Let me go buy the bank, go buy the boat or the car or whatever they want to buy.
Yeah.
So cash flow is number two. And again, right-sized metrics around cash flow. The third one, which is very unique to service businesses, is financial efficiency of their labor. And this is the piece that is less talked about, but super important. And this was an unlock for me. When I started to recognize that every day I was buying hours from my technicians, and my job was to sell as many of those hours as possible. And I just, of course, break it down to one day, but that's not how project work works. But the analogy I use, and I tell it a lot, I keep preaching it out there because I want it to land. It was a game changer for me. If we ran a fruit stand, we bought fresh fruit every morning from the wholesaler, whatever fruit we didn't sell, we had to throw away, affected the profit of the fruit that we did sell, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you still bought all of that fruit.
Yeah.
The same thing is true for labor. Every single day, your team shows up, and of course you have overhead, you have your administrative staff, they're non-billable. When you think about your billable staff, every day you're buying, let's call it 8 or 10 hours per day. You have to sell as many of those hours as you can. Any of those hours you don't sell affect the profit of the hours that you did. And that is such a critical factor when it comes down to service businesses. And that's why project efficiency is one factor, which is probably the factor most people think about, but it's what happens off the job that also is a huge factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're efficient on the job and you're still not making the kind of money you should, or you're not as profitable as you should be, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening off the job that's affecting your profitability.
How do business owners normally respond when you tell them it's that simple? These are three main categories that you need to be focused on. And if you did that and you got these right sized, you'd be much better.
Yeah. They want it. I think they're overwhelmed by it.
Yeah.
By and large, this industry, and again, it's true for most service industries, it's not made of business people. It's made of trade people, right? Who are very ensorcelled by the technology, right? They're in love with the finished product. They're in love with working with their hands. I've heard time and time again from business owners, hey, I'm not a numbers guy, right? Okay, that's cool. Do you have the profit to hire a numbers guy? No? Okay, then you need to become a numbers guy.
You have two options. You need that person on your team, or that needs to be you. Choose.
Or that needs to be you. And again, it can be right-sized. Like, I'm not
Yeah.
saying I need to teach you how to be an accountant in order for you to be a business owner, but damn it, you need to understand certain things. And so I think, to more pointedly answer your question, the initial response is usually overwhelm. It's usually pushback. It's like, oh, you know what? I've survived without this. I think I can survive. And absolutely. I mean, our industry is fairly easy to survive in, honestly, but thriving is a whole different story.
I've known you long enough, Matt, and you and I, for the record, I mean, we've known each other certainly more than, I would say, 10 years plus, probably. And you've always been this way, but I'm going to say you've even come more into this season as you and I have gotten to know each other better. You like to ask big, bold questions, and you're not intimidated by asking them, and you're not intimidated by them being asked of you. What is a bold question? Maybe the bold question that every business owner should be asking themselves right now.
I think the question is, what do I want from this business ultimately? You know, what does my potential exit look like? And when I say exit, I'm not talking just about selling or transitioning. An exit, as we talked about earlier, it could look like a business you wholly own that somebody else operates, that you receive a financial reward from, and that you're building equity in. But ultimately, I think the big question is, what the hell am I building, right? Am I building a job that I can never escape from? Or am I building an actual business? And am I capable of doing it? If the belief is there that if there's a lack of confidence that I'm the right person to build this business, then we have to unpack whether we can overcome that confidence or not. And in many cases, you can. In many cases, you are your own limiting factor. We know that, right? It's just having faith and realizing, breaking that belief of like, hey, I've been a worker bee my whole life. I'm happy now making 20% more than I did as a worker bee. So that's the big question. What the hell am I building?
I want to pull a thread on that an idea you just expressed and I would say this was, I like to teach or talk from personal experience rather than tell anybody what to do. But one of the flaws from my own personal leadership journey has been learning that by being the leader or in the leadership position, it doesn't mean I have to know all the answers. In the beginning, I thought I did.
Yeah.
And I was maybe even naive enough and full of myself enough to think that I actually had the answers. The older I get, the more answers I realize I do not actually have. And I'm more at peace with that, because the clarifying detail or the important detail is the important to understand, well, what are you trying to achieve? And it is important for you as a leader to know that. Yep. What is the thing that you're trying to build? What is the end result of whatever the project or the mission that you're on? And I do agree that in business, so many business leaders fail to really define like what is success and or what is successful exit. And I appreciate you saying that doesn't mean you sell the business, because I think that's a flaw in some of the communication in the business community to say success equals selling your business. Some people love their business and have no desire to sell their business.
Right.
But at some day, you're probably going to want to work less. At some day, you might even not want to work.
Right.
And so by being clear with, if that's true, when do you want that to be true? And then back solving, how would you go about achieving that? That gives clarity and focus to your work and the conversations and the counsel that you seek. And it's probably puts a lot of the people around you additionally at ease, knowing they're pointed in a certain direction or trying to achieve a certain outcome. And so where I'm just curious, I mean, those are some of my beliefs or experiences. What what have you found to be true as you're working with business owners? I mean, how clear are they typically on knowing what they're trying to achieve? And how open are they to being maybe engaged in conversation that helps take them down a path to gain clarity?
Yeah. I think it's tough. I think it's tough for a lot of us, especially when you look at the personality types of integrators. Many of them are not a visionary personality type, and that's totally okay. They're more of the executor integrator, from the EOS world, the integrator versus the visionary, right? And so sometimes it's hard for them without proof to think about what's possible. And so in our experience, that's usually asking a lot of questions, giving them examples of what's possible, because I've identified that once somebody knows what's possible or sees what's possible, they're willing to go out and do it. Right? We do this often. We see what's possible and we go get it. And so it's usually through a process. I would say very few people are incredibly clear about what they want to build. The only time that I can remember where we've talked to an integrator or client and they were pretty clear about what they're building or what their exit looks like is when they're really close to exit. Like, hey, I'm 70 years old. I know in 2 years, I don't want to work anymore. But there's very few people that we've talked to that are within their first 20 years of business or 15 years of business who we say, hey, what are you trying to build here? What do you want the end to look like? Or what's the exit look like for you? Or, what's retirement? And most of them just kind of like, oh, I don't know, man. I want to make it through this year and next year.
Or to make it through this week.
Yeah, we'll make it through this week. Or not keel over on a job site, right? And so it's really powerful, like you said, to know what that is. I actually think there's some judgment that comes up when people go through this exercise because, and I may be projecting here, but when you're standing in front of a bunch of employees and say, hey, guys, over the next 10 years, your job is to get me to retirement. That can feel, you can feel like you're judging yourself a little bit. Like how are these people going to want to be excited about getting me to retirement? Right. But the reality is that we talked about authenticity earlier. The more authentic you are, the reality is you end up finding people who are willing to support that journey. And so ultimately it might not be the people who are sitting in front of you when you go, I mean, nobody's going to have a meeting saying, hey, your job in the next 10 years is to get me retirement. But finding people who are willing to take that journey with you, they're out there. And the more authentic we are about what we want, the more clarity we have about what we want in our business. Yes, that might create some turnover, but it'll be turnover that will end up hopefully with people who are willing to support you in that journey. And I think you actually experienced this in your business.
I did. When you read the book Traction, there's a chapter on people and they talk about, being authentic and declaring your mission, vision, values. And the more clear and concise you are at doing that, it's going to have a double, the book was talking about having an impact. Those that agree with that are going to align and those that don't are going to be repelled and they're going to leave. And I could be misquoting it, but I want to say Traction talks about a 30% employee churn is typical when you're, rolling out the system. And I was terrified by that. But at the same time, I wanted people around me at One Firefly that were aligned with my beliefs, and more aligned with my beliefs as I became better at declaring what those beliefs were rather than hiding behind those beliefs. And we did. We saw probably 35% churn of our overall staff. If you look at between 2019 and 2021, there was a blip there with COVID. No one was leaving jobs, even if they didn't want to be there. They were going to stay employed to the best of their ability. But as soon as that COVID threat eased a bit, we saw some accelerated churn in that little sprint. And on the other side of that, we've seen some of the lowest rates of employee churn in our company history. Because now the people that want to be here and they believe what I believe, and that's okay to say that, they want to be here. They want to build a great company that is aligned on helping our clients and helping our people. Our vision, not to be preachy, is to help people feel proud, prosperous, and connected. Everyone in our company can restate that. Everyone can restate our mission. Everyone can restate all of our values. And that's awesome. I can tell you, folks listening, I did not have that for most of the years of this business. I didn't even know what our values were most of our years in business until we went and worked on that. And it is, it is a flywheel. I know your podcast is called The Flywheel Effect, right?
Yep.
And it's as you start to do these things, and you talked about all these systems that ultimately impact building a great business, is each and every one of these systems, as you work on them and improve them, it injects energy into the flywheel of your business. So I love what you stand for, Matt, and how you help people. And I'm a testament of the impact that getting good coaches in your life, that it can have on your personal happiness, your professional success, the money in your bank account, right? All of those things improve as long as, you're willing to learn and be open and be humble and acknowledge you don't have it all figured out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's been my journey. The more I realize I don't know, and yet I seek, the faster my flywheel turns.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny as you talk about that. It brings up something that was an unexpected benefit to the community, that we built in the I observed, which is borrowing the confidence of others. Because as you're describing your business right now, you're picking off fairly mature fruit trees, right? You kind of know when the season's coming. You know how to prepare for the season. You know what happens if a frost is predicted. Like you're working on, or if you like wine, maybe you're working on an estate vineyard that's been around for a while, right? Like you have things well figured out. And when somebody comes and visits that vineyard or your business, or you talk about your business, they can't help but be in awe of what you've built. They weren't around when you were, kind of figuring things out and getting that seedling, those seedlings up and running. And man, we didn't get to pick any fruit off the trees this season, but damn it, we're going to try again next season. Right. Nobody saw that. And the community, there's different people at different levels, right? There are people picking off the mature fruit trees. There are people who've just planted their seeds, and everybody in between. And the beauty is we're instead of listening to someone describe their business and saying, wow, I need my business to look just like that tomorrow. Mm-hmm. They're recognizing like, okay, I've got 3 or 4 clicks to go, right? I'm going to get to this next click, and I'm going to borrow the confidence from the guy that's at the next click. I'm not going to try to borrow Ron's confidence, because Ron, I mean, you're showing up in a way today. I mean, I've known you long enough. You're showing up totally different today than you did back then. And that's amazing. To think that Ron from 15 years ago would have been able to show up that way. Yeah. Wouldn't have been possible. Like the things that you've created over that time weren't possible 15 years ago for you. And it's been a lot of clicks that you've, a lot of unlocks for you over the years. So my point is, no matter what community you're involved in, you have to be in some kind of a community. Otherwise, to your point, we'll bring it all full circle. This is a really freaking lonely journey as an entrepreneur. And you can't help, the human condition is to compare ourselves. That's the human condition, right? You can't help but compare yourself to these guys that are 10 clicks away. Like, just compare yourself to the guy that's the next click up, and I guarantee you, he'll turn around and he'll pull you up. In whatever community, if it's a good community, that's what's going to happen.
And that was one of your breakthroughs. That's what I'm hearing, is that the vital in the beginning was one-on-one consultations. And the vital today is group settings and people of different tenures in business being facilitated through a plethora of business system conversations that ultimately are likely to impact, the people in the circle.
Yeah. Yep. And
that's that was where many of my breakthroughs in my life and business have come in those group settings. It's power. I mean, I still do some one-on-one things here and there, but much of what I do, I mastermind with you, Matt, and some of the other service companies in our industry. And I'm in some other masterminds. There's just so much genius. If you can surround yourself with so much genius, number one, you get to give. I believe if I give, I will receive tenfold. So
Yep.
I love to give. And I don't ever need to know how it's going to come back. I just know that's the way the universe treats me. If I give, it will come back.
100%.
And so if you're in those group settings, give, 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 give. Don't ever ask for anything in return. And if that's what you believe, then just generally good things happen. And that's neat. I think that's a really neat unlock. If I were to ask you, Matt, about the businesses that you work with that have not scaled, they've not taken the advice, they have not been able to break through despite counsel and coaching, what differentiates those business leaders from businesses that have equally received the coaching and they're in the same soil, they're being watered, they're receiving the same sunlight, and they've thrived? What are some leadership characteristic differences?
What makes you assume we don't have 100% success rate?
All right, maybe you do. So in this fictitious world where maybe everyone doesn't rocket to success.
No, hey, your question is grounded in reality because you've done so much of the work. You've seen those guys. You've been in the same room with those people who, and I hate to say those people because it's not them. It's not them as a person. It's who they're showing up as in those moments.
They're willing to do the work or they're not. And
Yeah.
that's not a judgment of the coach. That's a judgment of the athlete. Either you're willing to go to practice, put in the extra hours, eat right, get proper sleep, take care of your body, or you're not. And it just is.
Yep. And for us, we have those. And I would tell you for sure, the main characteristic that differentiates those who achieve and grow and those who don't, doesn't matter what program they're on, doesn't matter where they are in life, is their ability to recognize they don't have the answers and that they're going on a personal growth journey. And that's what life is about. Life isn't about knowing the answers and stopping, right? So those who can take on that philosophy of every day I need to just be a little bit better than I was yesterday, may not be perfect. That's totally okay. Those are the folks that succeed. We actually have, they may sound ridiculous, but we kind of categorize, not in like a, talking trash on our members kind of way, but we sort of categorize members in three ways. We have sippers, gulpers, and fighters. So the gulpers, these are the ones we literally call it drinking the Kool-Aid. They show up, they drink the Kool-Aid. They don't ask, they don't second guess anything. When somebody tells them, hey, this is my feedback, they take it in like it's the truth. They execute quickly. They see huge results very quickly, right? I mean, we've even seen some of our members turn their businesses around in a year, which is a very short amount of time.
Wow.
Others, other gulpers, it's a couple of years. You have sippers. They don't really, they're not second guessing, but they do take time to implement. So they're drinking the Kool-Aid, but they're sipping the Kool-Aid, right? They're not sort of pushing back, but they're just slow to go. And they're just going to take longer, but they eventually have success. Mm-hmm. And then you have the fighters. And the fighters are the ones that fall through the system and they don't succeed. And what those fighters are, they're the ones that show up. They actually ask for advice. They ask for help. They take it back and they say, nope, I know better. And they just keep doing things the way that they are going to do them, right? And they fight inside of their minds. They fight inside of their businesses. In fact, many of them are very confrontational with their employees. They believe every day when they wake up, they have all the right answers. They fall out of our system. And unfortunately, those are the ones who just are not on a growth journey.
Makes sense. I'm going to close out with this because I know you have meetings right after this recording. Where do you see Vital 3 years from now? What's the business look like? What are you doing? How are you serving people?
Yeah, great question. For us, we are continuing to double down on the group work that we're doing. We're seeing such incredible results with our members, and now open up just a whole swath of folks who can come into our circle that we weren't able to serve in the past. So we will continue. I believe in 3 years, we will have this super robust community. We envision that it being 3 different levels in their journey, kind of like the levels I talked about earlier. And each level is turning around and helping the people, are grabbing up the folks from the other level. I believe that's really important. So we'll continue to have this incredible journey for people to go through. And I also envision us taking our systems and serving other luxury home service business owners. So there are other luxury home services that are basically on the same job sites as our integrators. Your custom pool guy, your custom solar company, your custom window company, cabinetry. They're dealing with the same challenges as our integrators are, and our systems and processes can help them as well. And how beautiful when they're part of our community, because now the integrators and these other home services can trade, leads and, have all these incredible conversations. So we believe that that's going to be a wonderfully powerful solution for a bunch of different people.
Love it. Matt, I want to thank you for joining me on this episode of Automation Unplugged. It's been a very fun and enlightening conversation. How can folks that are listening or watching, how can they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I'm on social media. I post quite a bit on LinkedIn. So just look me up at MJ Bernath on LinkedIn. I'm also on Instagram. Those are 2 most sort of common. And then also we're on YouTube. Grow with Vital has a YouTube channel. And then my email, matt@growwithvital.com, is a really great way, along with our website, which actually probably by the time this episode airs, we'll have launched our new website. So that'll be really exciting. Yeah,
I didn't know that. I would have inquired about your approach there.
Yep.
We'll have to bring you back on and talk about it.
Next couple of weeks, we'll have our new website out. So it's streamlined and, very excited about it.
Awesome. Matt, it's been a pleasure having you on the show, sir. And I just thank you for everything you and your team are doing for the industry. You're trying to help all of the individuals that want to be helped. You guys are doing so much good out there in the world. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Ron. Always great chatting with you, man.
All right, buddy. Be well.
You too.